Let me call this meeting to order of the National Heritage Area Management Plan Advisory Committee. And before turning it over to any public comment, let me just make note of who we have present in the meeting. I'll start with our voting advisory committee members. Vice Chair Elizabeth Patterson from Benicia, Mike Campbell from Clarksburg, Lenora Clark from Discovery Bay, Paulette Hinham from Cortland, Douglas Shaw from Walk, Carol Jensen from Brentwood,
here,
Janet Lake from Freeport, James Motlow from Locke, David Stewart from Sacramento, Jan Vick from Rio Vista, and Jean Yokotobe from Ileton. And in addition, Campbell Ingram with the Delta Conservancy, who's one of our ex officio members, welcome. Mike Moran from East Bay Regional Park District, also an ex officio member, welcome. And have I missed any of the Trevor Rice, I'm sorry, ex officio member from National Park Service, welcome. And then I see that Matt Holmes got in there at the bottom of my screen where I couldn't see him. Welcome, Matt. From Stockton, Matt Holmes. Did I forget anyone in the introductions that is a member of the committee, either a voting member or an ex officio? Okay, well, we'll continue to monitor that. By my count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 of the 15 voting members are present, so that's a very healthy quorum. So let's move on to agenda item 2, which is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on non-agenda items. Is there anyone joining our meeting who would like to comment on an item that's not on the agenda? Okay, we will consider there to be no public comments. We'll move on to agenda item 3, which is an opportunity for advisory committee members to provide brief updates. And again, hold them if they're related to the meetings we had last week in Benicia and Walnut Grove. We did have good attendance from our advisory committee there, and we'll cover that in agenda item 4. But are there any announcements that you all would like to bring to the group specific to your community, your organization, or anything that you think would be of interest to the group?
Eric?
Yes.
Can I interrupt for a second? There's a phone number 916-708. Just wanted to check and see who that was, so we can rename you.
That's me, Katie.
Oh, that's Katie? Okay.
Yeah, you'll probably want to keep that muted, Katie, because I'm hearing a vibration and echo. So. All right. Well, any advisory committee member updates? I know there's good things happening out there with the projects you're involved in. Douglas, you have your hand raised. Douglas, would you like to?
Right. Okay, on September 18th, Saturday in Stockton at the Zhonghua Square, there will be a Mid-Autumn Festival celebration from 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock. So there will be a lot of fun, entertainment, and I think the Delta Conference will also have a booth to share the environmental justice survey results with the public. So this is going to be next Saturday, Stockton, Zhonghua Plaza, Mid-Autumn Festival celebration.
So September 18th, Stockton Autumn Festival celebration, Douglas?
Yes, it is held by the Stockton Downtown Alliance.
Oh, wonderful. You don't have to, but if there's any additional information on that or a web link you want to provide in the chat, that would be helpful. But no need to, not mandatory. Thank you. And Elizabeth has her hand raised.
I should put myself off mute. Thank you very much. I have some short news, which is good. And that is we have our traditional art walk on Main Street in Benicia. But I wanted to bring your attention to something that is really unfortunate. And I kept thinking it was not going to unfold this way. As I've talked about before, is that there is the President Lincoln Presidio during the Civil War in Benicia. And it's on the National Historic Register. And because of SB 35, which doesn't account for property, only structures on the National Register, SB 35 is the piece of legislation that allows residential mixed-use development to go forward without discretionary review or CEQA. So it looks like that's going to happen. And we will lose the National Heritage designation. They will not keep, they might keep the structures, but they won't keep the actual district. So we'll probably lose the district, but not the structures. So if anybody has a bright idea about how to deal with this horrible state legislation, SB 35, let me know, because I would really appreciate some assistance.
Is is it the city of Benicia that will be approving this proposed development, or
so it's approved ministerially by staff. And the provision in SB 35, allegedly for affordable housing, it only requires 10%. So that's a bit of a joke. And we've had a number of charrettes. We had a charrette, and we had a planning process to identify this area of special significance, and that doesn't qualify as a design standard. And the conservation plan, which most of you know through the Secretary of Interior standards, you have a conservation plan for historic districts, and the conservation plan talks about the entire district, and that does not constitute a standard according to what we're being advised by city attorney. I just unbelievable. I kept thinking that this could happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you for raising that, Elizabeth. And of course, if anyone has any, would like to know more, I'm sure you'd be welcome to follow. You'd be happy to follow up with them on that.
I would be. If anybody has some ideas, I would be most welcome. Time is of the essence.
It kind of relates to my update, Elizabeth. We also are pivoting around SB 35 here in Stockton. The state is building housing on its surplus land because counties and cities are unwilling to build the housing that we need. And so they're scrapping our entire county fairgrounds, which is fine. We need housing more than we need the fair, but we have a Japanese relocation center from the Japanese confinement sites list. And so we've been able to petition the State Department of General Services, who's making the designations as to what is surplus land. I don't know if that applies to your property there, but we weren't able to, nor did we want to stop the housing, but we have been able to get what was originally a 4-H FFA building that was used for the Japanese relocation roundup, preserved within the future design of the housing development. So there's definitely a way to politic and get the significance of the Presidio integrated into whatever future housing development they have. But I think we have a smaller asset than it sounds like you're working to protect. So that's what I wanted to share, is that Stockton has, at this point, it seems like we've successfully worked with the Japanese American Confinement Sites Consortium and eventually with the National Park Service Confinement Sites Program to preserve the Stockton Relocation Center, which is a state historic site that originally DGS didn't fully appreciate, but they got enough letters and emails from Little Manila Rising, as well as the San Joaquin County Historical Society and the Japanese consortiums around the country. So we should be able to save that building, which is certainly a site of national significance within the Delta, but which still falls outside of the boundaries of this national heritage area. which brings me back to my little axe to grind of how to get Stockton re-included in this story. And then my final update is that it is Stockton Beer Week from the 10th to the 19th. And there's lots of great beer on the Delta at Weber Point. That's certainly a significant heritage site within the Delta. Hope to see you all out there.
That's great, Matt. Thank you for posting the web link to that as well. And both of you, thank you for those mentions of historic properties that are impacted by Senate Bill 35. I have to admit, I'm not real familiar with Senate Bill 35. I kind of get the general idea, but that's a little disappointing to hear that it's kind of steamrolling considerations where there are historic sites.
If I could add to it is, I hope is the sound okay? There was a big battle in Berkeley on a Midden site. So Berkeley had always reserved the site and it was designated a historic site. Some of you might remember Spangler's restaurant, and it was the parking lot across the street. And they won in the lower courts, but when it got to the California Supreme Court, they said that the Midden site didn't qualify for, quote, structures. So there's not even a recognition of artifacts, let alone the historic nature of the site. As you know, to qualify for the standing with a National Historic classification is that you can do it by what happened, by structures, architectural interests, or history that occurred. And so these grounds were the grounds for the military maneuvers and for the parade grounds, because they were the commanding officers' quarters. So I think maybe at the very least, if comments could be sent to the legislature, it could be fixed, and the author simply will not yield. He has no interest in going back and fixing the legislation. And I'm all for housing. I mean, I've testified, I'm on record as testifying for housing for decades. So this is not an anti-housing issue. This is preserving our history.
Yeah, thank you. Well said. Welcome to Gia Moreno. Gia, we're glad to have you join us. We're just going through member announcements right now. And James.
Eric?
Yes.
Eric, I have an announcement. This is Jean Yokotobi.
Yeah, okay, we'll go ahead, Jean, and then I'll get James and Jan after you.
Okay. I just received a phone call and some sad news. Juicy's just burned down.
Oh my goodness.
No, you're kidding.
Oh,
Right.
no.
So
Wow.
that was a historic landmark.
Oh, that's horrible news. Doggone it. Wow. Well, that's going to color our whole meeting. For those of you who know Juicy's, what a incredible Delta institution. And wow. Well, I'm certainly sending good thoughts to the Marias family, and I'm really sorry to hear that. Thank you, Jean. We'll be, I'm sure, hearing more about that as more details emerge. Jan, and then James, and then Mike Moran.
I just wanted, this is a historical happening, and that is the Rivista Bass Festival, which is like 90 years we've been going on with it. Well, not that, 70 something years. And it will be held the 8th, 9th, and 10th of October. And it's going to be really big this year, because we haven't had one for a couple of years.
Thanks for announcing that, Jan. I'm sorry, James, and then Mike.
Thank you, Eric. Can you hear me okay, first of all?
Yeah, you sound great.
Great. Okay. That's really terrible news about Juicy's, first of all. It's really kind of, I was going to say something for very upbeat, but it's just tragic for Mark's family and such, and all the people who were employed by Juicy's. So it's just, I really need to acknowledge what a tragedy that is for all of us who live in the Delta. So as I was saying, I do have good news. Couple of good things are happening for Locke. One is actually happening right now on NPR radio on All Things Considered. They are doing about an 8-minute spot about Locke. So that's really good because it brings public awareness to this community and such. And then the other major thing that's happening for Locke is that in, I believe the airtime is going to be in November. It's part of an ongoing show that that HBO Max's Unravel is going to be starting to air then about Chinese takeout. They're giving the entire second episode to the town of Locke. So
Wow.
I don't know how long this is going to be, but they have a major star, Lucy Lang, I believe, is the Chinese major star who is going to be.
Lisa Ling, sorry.
Thank you very much, Douglas. So yeah, that's going to be a major focus on Locke, and hopefully that will bring, really positive things to Locke and to the Delta by extension. And once again, all of our thoughts and concerns go out to the Marias family and their employees.
Yeah, well, thank you for stating that so eloquently, James. And that's also really good news about the attention to Locke. You said today's All Things Considered show?
Yeah, it's airing right as we speak. I believe
Okay.
it's 3 o'clock block. It's about an 7-minute to 8-minute profile, but you can pull it up on NPR radio. Yeah, you go.
Agreed. And great about the HBO Max show that'll be worth checking out. Awesome. Go ahead, Mike Moran.
There we go. Wow, I'm a little gobsmacked about Juicy's. That's just tragic. But just as far as some better news goes for visiting other places around the Delta, we are, since I stepped down at Big Break, we are getting our new supervising naturalist. His name is Wyatt Moore, and he will be hosting folks who come to visit Big Break starting Saturday. So we're looking forward to that, and we'll be onboarding him. He doesn't know a lot about the Delta, but he knows an awful lot about connecting with folks. So there's a lot of opportunity for some great connections and collaborations there. And on the 17th and 18th, Big Break will once again be hosting our All Abilities Day, where we have activities for folks with all physical, cognitive, emotional abilities to come on and enjoy and connect to their parks. Because of COVID, it'll be a registration only program with staggered starts, but you can find out about that on Big Break Visitor Center's Facebook page. Thanks.
And Mike, those dates are September 17th and 18th?
Yes, September, next Friday and next Saturday.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, a great set of announcements. Are there any others to put forth before the group? Okay. Well, great. Let's move on to the meat of our agenda. Agenda item number 4, which is a report on the public workshops that were held last Monday and Tuesday in Benicia and Walnut Grove, respectively. And a handful of you were there. It was really great to see you all in person. It was just great to be in person. And I'll turn it over to the team to make a fuller report, but I just wanted to offer that as introductory comments. I'll turn it over to Carolyn, Augie, and Nancy from Point Heritage Development Consulting, and then to Katie Metro from State Parks.
Thanks, Eric. So hello, everyone. And I wanted to start by saying thank you for the hospitality last week. In addition to the public meetings, I was able to tour the region to spend a couple of days getting to see the remarkable places I've been reading about for the last year. And just an amazing set of resources. I've been thinking about it all week since I got home, how much there is there. And how much opportunity. So just so grateful that it was designated a National Heritage Area, because hopefully we can bring that forward and get that national recognition that it so richly deserves. And thank you to all of the members of the committee who met with us as well as we toured the region. So just very, very good experience. So we wanted to give a brief report on the public workshops. Many of you were able to attend one of the workshops, so hopefully you were able to make the rounds in the breakout groups, but we thought it would be helpful to share some of our team's general impressions and feedback, things that we heard maybe repeatedly. We are in the process of compiling all of the notes from the meetings, and we'll have a more official report a little later, but we did want to go ahead and just share some impressions with you all. So as you know, we started with just the overview of the management planning process, and then we spent the majority of the meetings in breakout groups in 4 areas of discussion, and played musical chairs, so hopefully everybody was able to make the round. So the 4 areas, those who were there will recall, we looked at the story, at interpretation and education, we looked at tourism, we looked at resource stewardship, and then the natural environment and recreation. So each of us on the team took one of those groups, and I thought we'd just each give you a quick some feedback, and then we want to hear feedback from you all, those who were there. Is Katie there? I can't.
Yeah, Katie, if you've got your phone on, you can't have your audio, your computer audio and your phone on both. It makes that, I don't know if
we're
that's
getting
true.
a lot of static, so interference.
My phone is off. I mean,
Okay. Katie, do you want to talk about the story, that breakout group, and then we'll each talk about the breakout groups we facilitated. We'll start with you.
Sure. Now, I'm speaking off my phone, and the Zoom is muted. So can you guys hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yeah, you sound great. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. We had a great turnout at both locations, and we had 4 questions that we asked folks. The first thing we did is we broke down the main topics, which are our primary theme topics, and display that to folks. So, we had the natural resources and environment, changing landscape, agriculture and industry, importance of water, and then see if I'm missing anything, our sub themes, which are transportation, recreation, the arts, and military history. And I think Heather's on the call, so if I'm missing something, just chime in. So first we talked about some of the content for those primary themes and our sub themes that go with it, and then we asked we didn't want to spend a lot of time on the themes because we've already done a lot of background research with you all, and so what we did is we asked 4 questions. The first one is what stories do you want to hear? So within those the context of those topic points. We heard a lot of interesting things. Some of the things we've already talked about, such as indigenous stories, Portuguese and Filipino, early navigation, uses of the waterways, past industry, conflict stories. Bridges were really interesting because we haven't really talked about that. So I learned a lot about how the bridges, who designed the bridges, and things like that. We also heard some of the new stuff is ferries, especially ones that in Benicia area, the shipyards in Benicia. Let's see, resource stewardship, oral histories, connections from the Delta to the larger area, and how towns developed. So I thought that was really interesting. There's a lot more in there, but mostly the stuff that we haven't really talked about. And the second one was what are good ways to interpret these stories? Like, we wanted to hear, like, if you're a visitor in the area, how would you like to receive this information? So some of them were interpretive panels, traditional interpretive panels at a site. For example, if you've got some people brought up, what about the all the landmarks and things that are along the delta that really don't have any interpretation to go with it, especially remains of things. So that was interesting. Walking trails, heritage trails was a really cool opportunity that was brought up. Doing a virtual drone flyover, allow for evolving new forms of recreation. This one was really interesting with provide different views in a moment of time from different people's perspectives. So I thought that was a really cool way of sharing information. So like if you were a Chinese, immigrant or landowner, how is that different from maybe the person who owns the property that you live on, speaking of block. Let's see, and the third one was what locations, sites, or landmarks can help tell these stories. This is where we start to find where the best areas to discuss these stories, and then maybe some other interpretive providers that can help as well. So basically, I'm not going to go through all of them, but for example, down in Benicia, there was a lot of requests for interpreting the military history. Clarksburg also, I didn't realize this had a German POW camp. And also in Rivista, so up in the Northern Delta, had a military base. So, interpreting those. Education in Delta schools. Stories of towns that have disappeared and those that still exist. So they provided some locations for where you could tell some of those stories. The Clarksburg Schoolhouse, we had a lot of discussion about Clarksburg as we were at Walnut Grove, and what people are doing in the area to restore the schoolhouse and how that could be a center, for example, a welcome center for people to the Delta. Transportation was another one. That was a big topic. So how people navigated the Delta, and like I think Carolyn, you were talking about sometime. You didn't realize you were on a levee, and maybe a lot of people don't realize that when they're driving, they're on a levee. So that's an interesting one. Native American stories. It was a really big topic, and we will be doing our consultation with tribes shortly. Let's see. Oh, packing houses. Packing houses were something that came up that I hadn't heard before. Cortland Market was a former dance hall, which I thought was really cool. And the passenger rail from Allentown to Sacramento. Let's see. And just a couple other things. What the last question was, what groups or partners can help tell these stories? So we got a long list of things, which I'm hoping we can, provide, more, get some more content here of interpretive providers. I don't know if you guys want to hear some of them, but I can talk about them too. So we got a large amount of information that we were really happy with and hoping to expand upon. So thank you all who participated.
Great, thanks, Katie. If it's all right with you all, we'll go through all four and then come back and ask for y'all's feedback and just let each team member give a quick report, and then we'll come back and have discussions. So Nancy,
Can I interrupt for a second? I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that the themes that were discussed at last week's workshop are available on the invite for this meeting, and also on our SharePoint site as well. So
and yeah, sorry about that. And I also we're going to be sending out the workshop summaries of all the workshops we've done to date. It also includes the themes and then all the topics that were generated from those discussions. So you should be getting that soon.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Blake. So Nancy facilitated the natural environment and recreation. So Nancy, do you want to give us a little summary of what you heard in that group or those groups?
Sure. Thank you, Carolyn. First of all, I just want to echo what everybody said about it. It was great to be able to be on the ground in person. And I honestly think it's even carrying over to this meeting as I see the way in which y'all are interacting and exchanging news and that we get to know so many of your faces now. So that's a big part of it. So thank you. As Carolyn said, I was working with the group focusing on outdoor recreation and natural resource conservation. And I very deliberately put it in that order because as we said at the group or at the public meetings, we know that the National Heritage Area won't necessarily be taking a lead on the natural resource conservation actions. It's in more of a support role. And as we discussed in some of the or in some of the breakout groups, an educational role, perhaps. So a lot of our conversation focused more on the opportunities and challenges associated with outdoor recreation. And no surprise, one of the biggest things that came up was just the opportunity that water presents. And so there was a lot of talk about water access, the need for perhaps more boat ramps. So the fact that people want bay access, that they may be looking for cheaper mooring, even though they're losing marinas in the Delta. A lot of conversation about potential opportunities such as water taxis or renting boats. And of course, education, boating safety. What we do with all of this, we don't necessarily have a clear picture yet, but it definitely shows us where where a lot of the focus is. And I think that one of the things that was really apparent is that there is an opportunity to use those waterways as the way in which to connect to the historic resources. Traffic was another big topic. And because traffic on land is difficult, finding ways to be able to use the water as the transportation route. I'm going to move to traffic as that was, like I said, that was something that came up. One of the things that was really good is that people very consistently said, yes, traffic is a problem, but it really is the commuter traffic. It's not visitors. We do want visitors. But finding a way to balance that with the agricultural legacy and the ongoing agriculture is definitely going to be an important discussion to keep having. Biking was a big issue because of the safety, the size of the roads. And so the fact that people want to bike and want to support biking was there, but it's not working the way it is right now. And of course, in the last year, biking has really grown. And so there are definitely some opportunities to see how that can be looked at. And with biking and hiking, something that came up over and over again is, okay, what are the opportunities available with the Delta Trail? And so even though that is a slightly separate initiative, it's going to be super important to tie the Delta Trail and the work going on with the Delta Trail directly to the management plan, so that whatever is coming out of that plan, whatever's coming out of the trail planning can get supported and reinforced here, and whatever's coming out of this planning, vice versa, makes it over to that process. Wayfinding is another thing that came up a lot, both vehicular and pedestrian slash cycling wayfinding. So it is fantastic that that is a project that's moving ahead. And again, I think it's a great opportunity to use this process to help push that process ahead and get it publicized and out there in the communities. And another thing that I think two more things that I want to mention. Interpretation came up over and over again as this recreation and interpretation and visitorship in general is just such a great opportunity to overlay this kind of recreation infrastructure with interpretation. How do you use recreation to connect place to place to place to be able to tell this wider story? So it sounds like we'll be able to have some good conversations with the interpretive planning group as we move forward. Another question that was asked a couple of times is how can recreation experiences help people understand what the Delta looked like historically? So there's a lot of understanding that the place that the story is being told, this larger landscape, there are opportunities to use recreation to connect that, to share that story, and then to connect these nodes of activity in the different communities. The last thing I wanted to mention is the role of the NHA. I think we talked about that a little bit in each of the groups, and people felt that there was a very good opportunity for the National Heritage Area to act as a convener and organizer where it came to both interpretation and recreation to help link areas with something in between. And then it came up that, and again, this is something you guys are doing, getting ready to offer grants, and people spoke about the need for grant dollars, starting with some small amounts. In the three things they mentioned specifically were for outreach, communications, marketing, planning, and events. Even small support for those things can both get the NHA out there, but also really support important things going on. Oh, one last thing, because I heard this coming from Katie as well, and it'll probably come from Carolyn, is people also spoke about community walking trails and heritage trails, whether I think that they would be vehicular or pedestrian. So just wanted to throw that out there as something else people mentioned again and again. Thank you,
Nancy. And Augie facilitated the resource stewardship group. Augie, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, thank you. At the outset, my apologies to everyone. My internet is unstable today. I don't know why. I'll keep my video off. That seems to provide a better connection, but I may pause or freeze. I'm sorry. And I too, I'll echo Carolyn's comments. It was great to be there last week, and it's always fun rediscovering the places that I had a chance to see back in March, and discovering new places like the Jelly Belly Factory in Fairfield. My Lord. I felt like Norm on Cheers when I walked in there. You know, there was not a beer vault, but all the jelly beans everywhere. What a place. So stewardship crossed all of these sections of issues that Carolyn and Nancy and the others talked about. What we were looking at in stewardship is not just the issues of the tangible, like documents or the built places, but the intangible issues, living traditions. And when I say it crossed everywhere, look, we were talking about historic preservation, cultural conservation, education and interpretation, resources in the natural environment, recreation, tourism, and to a great degree, how those all factor into heritage development and economic development. There were 4 overriding questions that we were kicking around. As I said, what is that connection between the intangible resources, the things that make us special as a culture and people, and how do they connect to the places we live or the built environment? How do we engage and support in order to help build capacity? And then when you build capacity, what do you do with that to get things done? A lot of very, very interesting discussion between the groups in both Benicia and Walnut Grove. I'll highlight some of these. I won't get into them all because there's quite a few. But telling the story of the people that live in the communities, people often stress that we have to remember heritage is not just about the past, but it's about who we are today. We hear this one a lot in other heritage areas. You know, we want visitors, but visitors can also lead to changes. And so in a way, there could be threats to the culture and the heritage that we're trying to conserve. This one was interesting because I never thought about it before. We think of saving those tangible things that are near and dear to us. You know, we have pictures of ancestors from our parents, our grandparents. We have documents that are saved. But as the world has moved more toward an electronic medium, it becomes too easy to lose those pictures or those documents that are saved on our computers. Not just the threat of a virus or the loss of a hard drive, but we oftentimes just delete, right? Because we need more space. And what we're deleting in doing that is the connection to our history and heritage. So, you know, some type of public campaign to let people know that the electronic image is just as valuable as those Polaroid pictures that we all have from the 1960s. I heard a lot about the cultural landscape and how population growth changes it. You all live it every day. And there was a couple discussions in both groups, both in Walnut Grove and Benicia, about certain legislation within the California legislature. One, and I didn't look these up beforehand, but one is SB 35, which one of the participants in the breakout session said directly threatens the cultural landscape. And then another one that was quite interesting, where they talked about the right to housing under California state law, and that how the need to build more housing in order to meet the growth of an expanding population, that there are laws in California that allow historic preservation and environmental mitigation laws to be circumvented because housing needs to be constructed rapidly in order to provide for people. That was fascinating to me. But they said all of those things will obviously and are threats to the cultural landscape, the land as you're working on it. With that, there is obviously a need to work and preserve what you have as a heritage while planning for the future. An astute person said, it's important to tell the story and how to tell the story, but we have to remember that oftentimes the people that have the money are the ones that actually control the story. You know, boy, oh boy, can that hit the nail on the head in a lot of places. The story also is told, I know this one from our work in Rivers of Steel here in Pittsburgh. The story that is told and the perceptions and understandings of that story change based upon where you tell that story. Whether you tell that story and when you tell it on land can provide a very different perspective and understanding if you told that same exact story on the water. And like I said, we know that from our experience here at Rivers of Steel, that the whole impression of the region changes when people get on the water. And what they were saying is that's a good thing because it will get people to look at their community differently. We're all used to being on land, but when we change that perspective, that environment of our perspective, it gives us a different appreciation oftentimes, or we see different threats. We all heard this, I'm sure, and we hear it often, the lack of money, right? There's so much out there that needs to be stewarded and conserved and preserved and built. And there's just not enough money to go around. And I had a couple public officials in one of my sessions where we got into the discussion of the administration of towns and communities and what incorporated towns there are, and most of them aren't, and what they can do and what then the county's responsibility is. And they only have so much resource to go around, whether they can help with in-kind services or actually provide grant funding. With that, finding professional help is often a problem. Architects, planners, if you need to hire them for building or for work in your community. But grant writers are also in need. And the notion is, and we hear this often, and I think both Carolyn and Nancy talked about it, the dissemination of information, particularly on opportunities for grants. How many community groups, volunteer groups are out there that need the money, that maybe be able to write a grant, but just don't know all of that information that's out there about grants that are coming up? And can the heritage area provide that type of information? Over on the interpretation side, or just in the communication side of it, as we move to different types of sharing of information, the lack of telephone and internet cell service is a problem. You all know that. Bigger roads are needed, but you can't build them because they sit on top of a levee. And what does that mean for more tourists if you're bringing more people in there? And you have to make sure that you don't lose the charm of your communities with your draw for more tourists to those places. I'll close with this one because I thought this person who said it was probably the one that was thinking the most advanced. And that person said they worry about how to implement the management plan for the heritage area. Boy, oh boy, I can tell you as a heritage area manager, that is something that you will work with every day after Carolyn, Nancy, and I walk away. The implementation of that, because you're going to be evaluated by Congress in 10 years on what your management plan said you were going to do, what your legislation requires you to do, and then actually what you achieved in those 10 years' time. The work is still out there to come. I don't want to dissuade you all or frighten you. It's a lot of fun to do, but it's going to take everybody to pull together. So when you think of the heritage area, don't just think of the DPC as the heritage area. You all are it, and you all have to figure out a way to come together and work like you are, even more so when you get to the implementation of the plan. So that's my summary.
Thanks, Augie. And then the last group was tourism. And I think by this time you're starting to see some common topics are emerging from each of the discussions in both nights of public meetings, which I think is what our team saw as well. And so a lot of those are reflected, kind of come home to roost in the tourism discussion. So in the tourism breakout groups, we looked really we asked a lot of questions, but we looked really in three areas: the story, the resource that's in the area, and then what tourism people call the product. What tangible is there in terms of resources, activities, places to go, things to do. And then the third one is the promotion. How do you let people know? And all those things collectively adding up to what is the visitor experience, and what is the effect on the residents who live in the area. One message that came through from all of the groups was that the feeling that there definitely is a role for the National Heritage Area in tourism. And so what remains to be determined is how that plays out in terms of the development of product or in promotion and marketing. And that's what we'll be working on going forward. But in terms of the discussion, some of the key things that emerged repeatedly The question about Delta as a place, and many people just said people in California don't even know it's there and don't recognize it as the Delta. And how can we lift that up? That was identified as a goal in the feasibility study, recognition of the Delta as a place. And of course, being a National Heritage Area, I think is a good step forward in that. But the state tourism office doesn't promote the Delta. You're kind of sliced and diced in a lot of different ways. The visitor experience in all of the groups, we talked a lot about that. And one of the questions, use me as an example, if I'm coming to the region and don't know the area, how can I easily find out what's there, what there is to see and do? And everybody agreed there's work to be done there. There were suggestions on needing to develop more trip planning resources, whether it's something as simple as half-day or one-day trip ideas, things that are age appropriate, special interests. People mentioned things from photo tours to artist days to promoting migratory waterfowl. I mean, there are lots of different ways to go about putting promotions out there. But one of the biggest challenges was the question of who is the current visitor and who do we want to be the visitor? Who is the current audience? And there just doesn't really seem to be a lot of information about that, other than we know people come for recreation, or they come to be on the water, or they bring their RV. But who those people are, there was general agreement that we need to know more about who is currently finding their way to the Delta, how they're finding their way there, what they're doing while they're there, and then who are some other target audiences, because if we're talking about growing the tourism market, we talked about who those audiences might be, who do you want to come, and then how do you want to reach those people so that it can be a benefit to the region and to the communities, and not a detriment, not more than can be handled. So we also talked a lot about the idea of promotion. Of course, TPC's already done a great website, Visit CA Delta, and is already getting information out there. It's got a great map. And so how can we build on that to make the Delta a destination? And how can we have a consistent message and let people know that this is a National Heritage Area? There was also a lot of conversation, and Nancy mentioned this in her group. I think all the groups, this came up of, we know recreation is there and people are enjoying that and coming for recreation, but how can we connect that to the history and the places that tell the stories and get visitors spread out throughout the region, just exploring and learning about the history of the area, not just boating, or not just recreation, but expanding beyond that. So lots of good conversations. As I said, we'll be compiling a little more official report, but we did want to give you some feedback on the conversations in all of the breakout groups and some of the main things that our team saw. But I wanted to also take some time now and ask for the committee, for those who were there, if you all had any feedback on your impressions of the meetings, and just in general, that you want to share any observations. Anybody?
Paulette?
Yes.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm concerned about the fact that there still is no Native American participation. And I know that Blake is working on this. I know multiple people are working on this, but I think it would be a really a misstep to send out notes about meetings that have been held without having some kind of input from tribes. And I think it would make it look like an afterthought, which it clearly is in a way. and we may have to own that. But there's a big gaping hole there, and it needs to be filled.
Matt, is that? I think
Yeah,
I see your hand up.
I just
Yeah.
kind of wanted to back up that comment and just sort of get serious about a strategy for engaging that population. And also just to make sure I'm reading the interpretive themes correctly, particularly people's stories and the absence of emphasis on Indigenous history in the region. I know that, I mean, we lead off with, you know, some things around immigrant communities, and I think that'll be an alienating framing if we're trying to reach this vital constituency. I'm sure there's, I mean, I see it's written really broadly. I think it's also okay to be explicit. We're talking about 12,000+ years of human occupancy and 150 of immigrant stories here. It would be perfectly appropriate to anchor our interpretive thematics in a deep Indigenous story here. And that would help us reach the people we need to do this right.
Great. Blake, do you want to say a few words about some of the outreach, and then maybe, and Katie, if you want to add to that, but maybe Blake, do you want to say something first about that?
Yeah, that's definitely, Paulette and Matt, I definitely share that concern as well. And I think one of the things we want to do right now is, I mean, we've sent out consultation letters to the tribes, both electronically and by mail. And we've received one request for consultation so far, but obviously we're anxious to have, you know, additional, you know, we want to be in touch with as many tribal officials as possible. So I think right now we're sort of faced with having to do a full court press at this point, just to get more people involved in what's going on. And we want to make sure that those people that have been involved from the tribes are able to participate as fully as possible. So yes, I share your concern right now. I definitely want to have more people involved from the tribes.
You have a quick follow-up, Matt? Otherwise, we'll go to Gia, then Mike, then Elizabeth.
Yeah, it was a super quick follow-up. Just that there's a new Region 9 US EPA tribal liaison who might be helpful, and I'd be happy to make a connection there, Blake.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Gia, then Mike, then Elizabeth.
So just as a reminder, there is a Native American on the committee, and I'm resource chair. If you do need help getting in contact with the tribes, I will let them know. I am very familiar with them. I had no idea that there was an issue with getting in touch with people.
Yeah, I mean, we have two other members that are tribal members as well of the advisory committee. So yeah, it's definitely been, you know, a concern of ours about it, making sure that people.
Yeah, that's what I thought, because I know that Jesus and Melissa are active in things. So I was confused as to why there was an assumption that there were no Indigenous people participating in this.
Okay.
Yeah, and Gia, we appreciate your regular participation, and I was just talking with Blake about this earlier because you know, I know it's been a while since we've seen a couple of other members of the committee, and I want to make sure that we're specifically reaching out to them to you know, learn a little bit more about. I mean, maybe it's just waiting for things to kind of gel and solidify more before they become more deeply involved, because we're all pulled in many different directions. But it's going to be very important to me that we pull this all together in a way that we do have input. I know there's a lot of different perspectives out there. And we can't rely upon you for all those perspectives, just as we can't rely upon the other members of our advisory committee. So, we're going to need a range of different participations to better understand that story.
Okay, and maybe that's a meeting that the 5 of us could have at another time, trying to do some more outreach or whatever.
Yeah, I think we're at the point where that's going to become critically important. Things are starting to gel into place. So it's something Blake and I will be talking about further within the commission, but if you're willing to engage with him on that as well, I would appreciate it.
Of course, anything. Anything to help out.
And Fluffy agrees. That's great. It just sounds like a Fluffy. I don't know. It could be Bruno for all I know, but it sounds like a Fluffy. So, all right, Mike, and then Elizabeth, and then Katie.
Yeah, thanks. I had to step away for a minute, so I apologize if you folks covered this already. Way back when, the early development of themes, we had separated Native Americans as a separate theme. And I admittedly lost track of how that went. So I'm wondering if that's related to this conversation, if it's something you folks have already addressed or not. Thanks.
Is that something Katie can address that? Let her jump ahead of you for just a moment, Elizabeth, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so we didn't include it in the outreach that we just did last week, but we had developed a very extensive list of themes and sub-themes with the interpretive task group that did include members of, I think it was Gina was part of that, and a couple other folks. So, I mean, we could put those up as part of the thematic messaging to say that these will be further refined as participation continues, or as consultation continues, so that it doesn't look like an afterthought.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they were there before and they weren't there for what you distributed last week, but maybe there's a good reason for that. Elizabeth.
The reason we did that is so because we hadn't done a full consultation effort with the tribes, but I didn't want to have that out there without having that fully vetted. But we can put it up on with the other themes just to show that show that it's a work in progress.
No, I think that makes sense. At least it makes sense to me. If it doesn't make sense to others, I'd like to hear. But I think it puts the onus on us to do that work soon, because the other train's going to start rolling down the track, and that car better be hitched to it. So, Elizabeth, and then Nancy.
So thanks. I have 3 things. One is maybe Gia would have some suggestions about the best way to present that this is not an afterthought. And so not through in this meeting, but maybe after this meeting or a convenient time, she could provide that. The second thing is that we just, the sorrowful story I told about the Presidio, we did do a consultation. It was Winton, and I can never remember the full name. It's the TRD Winton, and they're fairly active in Solano. So hopefully we're in contact with them. But if not, certainly the city staff would be able to provide the contact information. And then lastly, my experience has been that, like with the state as well as East Bay Regional Parks, that the rangers often have contacts that are very useful. So my thought is that we might want to cast a larger net, just because it's a different way of communicating, and we should respect that with indigenous folks. And but I really would like to see a way to indicate that from the get-go we have acknowledged the need to have a full scope of the role of the natives and how that developed.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. Nancy.
Just a really quick comment, because as Mike said, it was separated out to give it more prominence at the very beginning. But this is now the second time I've heard a comment, and I don't think it was Matt both times, where it's not included in the, in the immigration essentially theme. Just making sure that when it's listed, it's not listed as number 6, but get it ahead of the immigration theme could just take care of that messaging.
Great. And David Stewart has posted in the chat links to a couple of pieces that he's written. And for anyone who was trying to, kind of get in on a very I'll say basic, but your writing is anything but basic, David. But if you're trying to better understand this, you couldn't do any better than taking a click onto his links there, the pieces that were published in Soundings magazine.
I also wanted to mention that we had a discussion yesterday with the state parks and with the Point HDC team a little bit about the tribal consultation, and state parks was happy. It was like anxious to get us more in touch with their tribal liaison in terms of doing outreach with them. I've actually already been talking to the state parks tribal liaison about outreach, but I think right now, we're definitely going to be doing more of that.
Thanks, Blake. Is there anything else that we should be talking about at this time on this agenda item?
Eric, this is Mike. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, Mike. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that we are actively involved with the Yochadehi Winton Nation on the history of the native tribes in the Clarksburg area, and we have designated an area where we're going to develop a demonstration village or a demonstration area to honor they were called Iyamane, and I've learned a lot of Stewart, so he's been a real help to us, and we're also starting to work with tribes in the foothills to get information. So it's something that we are very focused on, and it's very important to us in our schoolhouse project to respectfully tell their story.
Great, thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
And I noticed as we got into this agenda topic that both Rich Tanaza and Morris Lum joined our meeting as guests. Welcome, you two.
Thank you.
So anything else on this agenda item? Let me pull the agenda back up on the screen here. So that's agenda item number 4, the report on the public workshops. Are we ready to go into agenda item 5? And this is an update on the task groups, the different task groups, and Carolyn and Katie will provide that update. And just a note to the group, I'm going to be stepping off at 4:30. I have to get on something else, but at that point, I will turn it over to Elizabeth to guide things through the remainder of the agenda, but I'll stick around as long as I can. But Carolyn and Katie, up to you.
And this will be fairly quick, just to make sure everyone has the upcoming task group meetings on your calendar. Heritage Development and Tourism will meet on October the 11th from 3 to 5. Resource Stewardship will meet October 12th from 3 to 5. And I'll let Katie talk about the interpretation one in just a minute. What we're planning, we'll put together an agenda and send that out in advance, but the meeting will really focus on reviewing more in-depth reports from the public meeting outcomes and the additional research and outreach that has happened to date, and look at priority topics coming up for the Delta Heritage Forum, which, if you don't have that on your calendar, is coming up November the 3rd. The forum will serve as our second round of public meetings. And what we hope is to bring all of the groups together at one time, and really zero in on narrowing down what the priorities are, because after the first of the year, we hope we'll be at a place where we're ready to start looking at goals and strategies to include in the management plan. So the upcoming task group meetings are really the bridge between the public meetings and the work done to date, and that milestone meeting that the Delta Heritage Forum will be. And then Katie, do you want to talk a little about the interpretation task group meeting?
Hey, Carolyn, before she does, October 11th, Heritage, what's the full name of that task group?
Heritage Development and Tourism.
Great.
Task
And
group.
then
That's
October,
on a Monday, and then October 12th, Tuesday, is the Resource Stewardship.
thank you.
And Blake has sent out save the date notices, calendar notices, but we will send an agenda and some additional meeting materials in advance so everybody will be ready to go. Okay. Katie, do you want to talk about the interpretation a little bit?
Okay, so we have a meeting with the task group on September 27th, which is a Monday, from 3 to 5. At that meeting, what we'd like to do is just get your feedback on those themes that we know, those consolidated themes that we developed. If there's any movement on meeting with tribes, I'll, and then make that announcement there, and then really look at what you're feeling of some of these questions that we brought up at our public outreach. Those were questions that I went over, and see if we can continue to work on locations, to tell these stories, methods, and then hearing somebody having breathing problems. Sorry. Hope you're okay. Anyways, it's getting some more work done on locations that we can tell these stories, and anything else you guys would like to talk about. So just either put it in the chat or just you can email me directly.
And Katie, that group is interpretation. What's the full name
Sorry,
of it?
yes, I think it's just the interpretation task group.
Thanks. Any questions for Katie or Carolyn? Okay. And again, not everyone is a member. I think the invites go out to all of the advisory committee members, but we have different memberships on these task groups. But of course, you're welcome to join any one of them at any time. So again, September 27, interpretation, October 11th, heritage development and tourism, and October 12th, resource stewardship. Okay.
Eric, may I ask a question or?
Yeah, please, Augie, go ahead.
Let's not forget there is a management and organization task force. I don't think anyone has signed up for that yet, but as we get deeper into this plan, that task force is going to need to be formed and begin to work on those issues related to that. One point as I close from my session is, how do you implement the plan? So I'm looking for volunteers.
Yeah, we'll make another run at that, Augie, before as we get a little deeper into this, but
Okay.
that will become more important as these other pieces come into better focus. Elizabeth.
Thanks, Vic. Eric, the reason I didn't sign up for it is because I have a whole lot of experience, but Augie, I'll sign up for it.
Thank you. Hi, Lenora.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
Unfortunately, I was not able to attend either of the workshops. You know, summer and vacations and stuff gets in the way sometimes. But I was wondering, it's so interesting to hear the information about what went on and the questions that were posed. What kind of attendance did we get?
I counted 22 people in Benicia and 29 in Walnut Grove. And that, of course, you know, probably 10 of that was either myself or Blake or the Point Heritage team or the State Parks team.
But that was a good turnout.
You know, for an in-person meeting, we all were kind of wondering what it would look like. And I'm pleased that everyone was good about their mask wearing. We did request that and followed local guidance on that. And I was pretty surprised we had the turnout we did, but of course, you know, I always would like to see a few more people, so.
Well, I had asked Blake, was there going to be a Zoom, and would that be possible? And it hadn't been set up at that point.
Yeah, we're still kind of trying to understand how to do hybrid meetings. And if anyone has seen good examples, I would love to talk with you, because it just seems to be the real challenge. We all understand the benefit of being able to patch people in remotely and have people present in one location, but the twain never seems to meet. So if you have good ideas or have seen good examples of hybrid meetings, I'd love to talk with you.
Okay, I think some people are trying to do streaming in those kind of settings. So I might try to pick some brains and see.
I mean, there's certainly ways to do it. It just, we're always trying to do it on a relatively limited budget, and maybe we just need to, you know, understand that we need to invest a little bit more to make it happen.
Just my thoughts. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lenora. Okay, anyone else on this agenda item number 5? Okay, then we'll move.
I have a quick, Augie said about us not having signups for the organizational subcommittee.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry if I missed that there was a call for volunteers for that, because I'm in.
Well, we put out an initial call, and I think we decided we'd revisit that as we got a little deeper into this. But if you're interested, Matt, that would be great. I don't mean to volunteer you, but I see your thumb up, so.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a good way to do what I'm here to do.
Wonderful.
That's great, Matt. I was going to send out another call for that and try to find some possible members of that subcommittee. So I appreciate that. I think Mike, you might have already suggested. I know that there are a few people who already volunteered for the committee, but we do desperately need more.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 6. And at some point during this item, I will say farewell via chat to you all. It's really great to see you, but please continue. And Elizabeth, if you don't mind guiding the rest of the meeting. And at the end, Blake will be sure to tell you when the next meeting is of the advisory committee. So agenda item 6 is the NHA partnership plan, and I'll turn it over to our Point HDC team.
And Blake, do you have, I had the one slide, do you have that, or do you want me to call that up?
I don't have it readily available, so
Okay.
if you can put it up, that would be
Can I
great.
share it? Am I a host? Can I?
Yeah, you should be able to.
You should be able to request that.
I see it right there. Thank you. Ah, that was easy. Okay, let me put it on. It's the briefest PowerPoint anywhere, one slide. So what we wanted to just tell you about and ask for your help is coming up next is we're planning to do some stakeholder interviews. And as we talked about at previous committee meetings, the legislation speaks many times about the importance of partnerships and even names different partners, governments, businesses, organizations, individuals, and that a big part of what the National Heritage Area does is going to be ongoing collaboration. And the legislation mentions that specifically with partners. And when we looked at the feasibility study, there were 27 organizations that provided letters of support and made commitments to partner with the National Heritage Area, which is great. And I think now that things are getting rolling, that number is probably increasing on a daily basis. So part of what we had planned to do is some individual stakeholder interviews. So we have had public meetings, we have task groups, we have site visits where we've met with people. So lots of different outreach. And what we want to do with the stakeholder interviews is to have a chance to talk one-on-one with, I think we've got up to 20 interviews that we've slated to do. And we hope that through the stakeholder interviews, we'll get some different perspectives on what does success look like. And maybe some new insights on different challenges and opportunities, some of the things that we've been talking about today. So what we will do in the interviews, we'll tailor questions for the subject matter expert, their area of interest or expertise, but we'll also talk in general, ask some basic questions about the role of the heritage area, just as we did in the public meetings. The types of activities, how to build awareness and support for the National Heritage Area. So again, just generating insights and information. So this list that I have up here is that just represents some of the different topic or discipline areas that we might not necessarily end up interviewing someone in each of those categories, or we may interact with them in different ways than just an individual stakeholder interview. But this is to give you an idea of some of the topic areas that, of course, we know National Heritage Areas address. And what we're looking for is suggestions of people that we should reach out to. And we've already had some conversations about reaching out to state agencies. That seems a logical thing to do, but others who are maybe leaders or activists or very engaged in some of these different areas. Maybe they're very involved in the arts, or they are advocates for historic preservation. And so what we want to ask is if you all know of people who would be good for us to interview in a stakeholder interview setting, if you could email the name, the contact information, and what area that person is in. If you could send that to Blake by the end of next week, maybe by the 17th, and we'll take all the lists and the ones that we have and come up with an interview list. And we plan to do those through probably through the end of October, hopefully finish those up before the Delta Heritage Forum. And then the information gathered from all the stakeholder interviews, again, will be compiled in kind of an assessment report that we'll have at the first of the year. So are there any questions, or that all makes sense to everybody?
Carolyn, can we make sure that you send the list to all of us so that we can populate the list?
Sure. Blake, we can follow up on that and just this list with everybody. Mm-hmm. And Let's see, Matt, did you have,
Yeah.
oh, you got your hand up? Sure.
I just wanted to sort of point out that, you know, delving each of these subject matters, these areas of expertise is, you know, should involve a couple of conversations with people in each of those genres, not just the wherewithal of those of us on this call. So like I'm going to need to share this interest with the historic preservationist folks and some of the conservationist folks. I just think we might need a little more time than 1 week to give you a responsible referral. I'm sure there are more knowledgeable people on here, but.
Right. So Matt, that's really a good suggestion. Maybe what we can do is get it started and send in what you know now. And then, but if we could be given another week and then get the, fill the rest of that out. Does that sound okay, Carolyn?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah, so we could say the 24th instead of the 17th. Does that give everybody a little bit more time?
Yeah, and I think my point is just that it's I don't know, it's important to be thorough and to give those people a chance to participate. Attenuated timelines are exclusionary. So we want to give them time to participate.
Right, and I mean, if we hope to do these interviews, hopefully in the month of October, our team will, we'll be dividing some of these up and doing them. When I've done these in the past, also sometimes, there might be a couple of people who are really good to interview together, two or three people as a group, but we don't want to get, a big group, or then you're back to having a public meeting. So if there are a couple of people who work together on one issue, for a long time as advocates or, movers and shakers, and it makes sense to interview them together, that's fine.
So will we figure out who that is, just sort of in an ad hoc way with side conversations? Or are we going to put these categories in a spreadsheet and have advisory committee members put their names in where they want to participate in interviews, so that there's a transparent process for how we inform these interviews?
I hadn't really thought about
when I was initially doing outreach, for the workshops, I did sort of develop a spreadsheet that was similar to what you're talking about. It's sort of a work in progress. I'm a little hesitant to send it out as long.
Oops.
Blake, you just froze up.
As long as you rectify, people and organizations in each one of those categories. So perhaps that could be something we could send along. That might be at least a start in that direction, recognizing that, as I said, it's sort of work in progress.
Yeah, we want to make it as accessible as possible and capture as many people as possible. So if we could keep it sort of simple but efficient, that would be good.
The other thing I might mention is that another piece of our outreach that is planned is to do just an online survey. So if there are people who can't attend a public meeting or haven't been able to be engaged in other ways, but they do want to participate in some way, we are planning to do that. We're still kind of talking about what's the right time to do that in the planning process, but that'll be another way that we try to do some outreach.
And then another question is, do you have, are you putting together common questions? So everybody would be basically asked, even though they're an area of expertise, they'd still be basically asked similar questions?
We will. We have some experience. We've done this just recently, so for another heritage area, so we have just some basic questions about awareness of the heritage area, role of the heritage area, activities, but then we, depending on what their area of interest and expertise is, then we also have some questions specific to that.
Okay.
So if it's tourism or preservation or whatever, then we try to get some specific feedback from them on that as well.
Are there any other questions?
Are there what?
Are there any other questions from any of you?
Oh, from the committee. I thought you meant for the interviews. Sorry. Yeah.
Elizabeth, this is Nancy Morgan. It's not a question, but I just wanted to build on what Carolyn is saying and, reassure Matt that 20 is not a lot of people, and we know that, but this is just a part of the process that feeds into the public meetings, and this is why it's going to continue to be really important to get the word out for public meetings, but also for you guys. You guys are the ambassadors for this project, and we hope that you can have conversations and bring information back, and the survey and all of these pieces will feed in. No one piece is going to be able to do everything, and so just wanted to try to reassure, because once we see this first list of names, there are probably going to be 60 people on it, and it's going to be hard to whittle down. But as we do, then use this list to think about how to reach those other people and how to engage them with this incredible group of partners you already have.
Okay, anybody else?
That was all I have. Thank you all very much.
All right. I can't see the agenda, Blake, so you can put the agenda back up, please.
Yes, I will. Just a moment. I'll share that.
Sure. Do we have any further discussion on item 6? And so we can make that. All right. We have member announcements and adjourn. I don't have a really good gallery view, so it's all right with me if you just want to talk if I don't see your hand. So let's see if anyone has a member announcement. We sort of had several at the beginning of the meeting, but you may have thought as we got into the meeting that you wanted to say something and didn't have a chance. You can jump right in.
If you wanted to close out the agenda, I think we'd get a gallery view back.
Oh.
I think.
I was just going to say briefly that, the surplus state property, the SB 35 issue that Elizabeth brought up, it's going to hit any surplus property in the Delta region. And that's maybe something we should do an inventory of, because, not just the historic sites that we happen to know about, but there could be a whole host of housing developments that impact this heritage area. And the state may not, DGS isn't known for being surgical. So I don't know, I would just say check on your own communities to see if the state is building housing in your community.
So SB 35 is not the surplus property legislation. So if it's, the property is city owned, in Benisha's case, this property is not city owned. If the property is city or county or agency owned, it's an update of long-term legislation, but the update requires specific notification for affordable housing advocates or NGOs and people in the business of building, and they get a first crack at bidding on property.
Yeah, I misspoke, but it is streamlining housing throughout the region. And so that is a concern.
Right. So thank you for that, Matt. Anything else? All right. Great meeting. I really enjoyed the workshops. I'm sorry I wasn't able to go to both of them. I thought they were really well done. I thought everybody did a great job on the breakout groups. And thank you for the summary today. And Blake, do you want to announce our next meeting?
Well, that's actually a little tricky because our next meeting normally would be the day after the Delta Heritage Forum, at least if we're going to kind of follow that, the odd month, the first Thursday in the month. I don't know how people feel about having a meeting right after the forum. I don't know. Are there any thoughts on that right now? Obviously, it would be nice to sort of have a debrief from the meeting, but I'm not quite sure. It could go either way.
Are there any objections to having a meeting right after the forum? And Trevor?
I was just going to second that comment, Blake, that having a debrief, especially since the Heritage Forum will be serving as the second round of public meetings, having a debrief would be helpful. Having it right after may not give enough time to sort of fully synthesize the public comments that we might get during that. So
sure,
whatever time frame I think is needed for Point Heritage and the rest of the folks to synthesize the comments to be able to get those out to the full group. Anyone who wasn't able to attend, I think would be important.
Why don't I send out, maybe I can send out an invitation or at least a doodle poll and see what people's availability might be the following week. The Thursday of the following week is Veterans Day. So that might, obviously that wouldn't work very well, but I can see what other dates might work instead.
Okay.
So I think I'm seeing not mass dismay at that. So I think I'll just go ahead with that.
All right. Any other comments on this? Jim?
I'm sorry, I raised my hand by mistake. My apologies.
Okay. If I don't see or hear anybody else, then I would say that our meeting is adjourned, and good job, and have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.